All right. Hello, everyone. Everyone's gathering. We'll give everyone just a few minutes to dial in and join. We're going to start structured, and then we'll get a little bit more into the Q&A and conversation. I'll kick us off. Let me officially welcome everyone to a very special session today. It's co-hosted by TRG and Mutinex. Today is all about disrupting legacy measurement. Thank you so much for joining me and Henry. Said earlier, for those that don't know me, my name is Chris Farrell, Chief Strategy Officer at TRG. We're formerly known as the Richards Group, full service strategy, creative, and media agency based in Deep Ellum, Texas. We're actually going to celebrate our 50th anniversary next year. We've helped make memories that move markets for brands such as the Home Depot, Chick-fil-A, Ram Trucks, Charles Schwab, the Southeastern Conference, Choctaw Casinos and Resorts, and World's Best Cat Litter. And today I am very excited to be joined by Henry Innes. He's the co-founder and CEO of Mutinex. He remains one of our favorite dangerous minds on the topic of measurement. To me, he brings much needed candor and transparency, and he's one of the few willing to call his own industry on its nonsense when it comes to the mystical world of MMMs. His track record spans across agency leadership at shops like AKQA and VMLY&R, as well as an investor in startups like Ideally and Springboard's AI. I know many of us are very familiar with Springboards in particular. At Mutinex, he and the team are building a product that helps companies make smarter, faster decisions on billions in growth investments, growth answers on demand, as they put it. So welcome, Henry. Thank you for joining today. This will be fun.
Not a problem. Great to be here, Chris, and thanks for the invite.
Absolutely. Okay, so I'm gonna give the quick agenda for the day, and then we'll get into the heart of it. So this is very conversational intentionally. I encourage everyone to use the chat. We'll have lots of time for Q&A, and I think what I'll do is just as questions come in, I'll monitor the chat, and Claire and Andy are going to help as well, and so I'll pepper them in as they make sense. So today, like I said, we're talking about why marketing measurement is stuck and why it is in need of a revolution. So today we saw in the chat, everyone from Dallas, Australia, brands and agencies alike. I know some of you are familiar with MMMs, and for many of you, it might be your first time thinking about what is a marketing mix model. Is it a solution that's right for my brand? So even if you're not well-versed in MMMs, that is perfectly okay for today. Today's discussion is designed for marketers of all experience levels, and we want you to walk away with a better understanding of the future of measurement for our industry. So we have 3 segments today. First, we will challenge the legacy model, where you'll learn how marketing mix models are not as scientific as we're led to believe. Our second segment is all about how effectiveness is closing the gap and why a generalized model is a better approach, hence the title of today's session. And third, we'll dive inside Mutinex, where Henry will share more about the Mutinex platform and how it helps you with growth answers on demand. A couple of housekeeping things. Today's session will be recorded. We'll share a link to all registrants afterwards in case you want to watch it or share it. And like I said, today is very much intended to be conversational. Please don't be shy. If you have a question, put it in the queue, put it in the chat, and we'll do our best to get to all of them in real time, as well as in the dedicated Q&A at the end. So, and also a special thank you to Claire and Andy and Henry and the entire Mutinex team for making today's session happen. We're excited. So with that, we'll dive in. I'll start with my first question for Henry. Henry, Mutinex was born out of a bold idea to change the way marketing is measured. My question is, why now, and what gap did you see in the industry that made you want to build it?
Do you want the real answer, or do you want
I
the?
do. I very
Okay,
much want the real
all
answer.
right. I was in a very large holding company, and I'm sure people can guess which one. And I got asked as we were kind of building a model, what if we just fiddled the levers to fit the investment plan a little bit better? And then I thought to myself, how much must this be happening across every market mix model that currently exists? And I thought to myself, gosh, maybe this is why no one talks about governance in market mix models. That was really the genesis of it. Quite ironically, we wanted to build the generalized model inside WPP at the time. And of course, I think the business under Sorrel was really a cottage collection of businesses with a centralized back office. So you had a lot of freedom to be an entrepreneur. Sorrel kind of ran it a bit like a franchise model in many respects. under Reed, and I don't think anyone would accuse Mark Reed of doing a good job. Under Reed, it became a very all about centralizing the capabilities and internal M&A and all of that sort of thing. So the ability for entrepreneurs to thrive in that environment was severely diminished. So
Mhm.
to my mind, there were two things. One, I didn't want to work for a centralized capability function. And two, I thought that if this is what's happening in measurement on what's meant to be the gold standard tool, maybe that's why people like Byron Sharp hate it. Um, and so it made sense to me to start to go, actually, how do we build a model with general intelligence and general understanding of marketing dynamics over anything else? And Sharp's book was probably pretty instrumental as well, because if you look at the founding of Mutinex, actually, but How Brands Grow came out in 2013, but it really took off in about 16, 17. Um, and that informed a lot of my thinking around that. I think the final thing as well that became pretty apparent is like, we used to run MMMs in Excel. Then we ran them in Python and SAS and all that sort of fun stuff. And like that meant you couldn't run an MCMC model, let alone an SVI model. And so the rise of the cloud meant that I felt there was a pretty high probability of this entire stack being automated. And of course, like at the time as well, I kind of knew, why do clients not get value out of MMM is like a core, and measurement in general. And I think we spend so much time preparing for measurement and preparing for the meetings around to discuss the measurement that we barely spend any time making decisions. And so, unless you inverse that entire paradigm, unless you make it super easy for people to get to an answer, um, then inevitably your cost of being data driven is going to be too high. Like, if I think every marketer in this room will kind of empathize with, like, the CMO asks a question, you kind of have a cascade of requests go through the business, and it takes far too long to answer that question. And everyone's sitting there preparing data, preparing MMM models, preparing this, preparing that, all that kind of stuff. And that just means the cost of being data driven becomes a blowout. The internal cost of ownership of data is really high. So, summarize, I think there's kind of three to four things. One, I didn't like the environment I was in. Two, I was pretty horrified by what I was seeing in measurement generally. Three, I thought the cloud would massively enable and accelerate the ability to automate. And four, I thought the internal cost of ownership of data was getting too high.
I'm curious on several things. The first one, your conversation with Byron, like why does Byron Sharp dislike MMMs for the most part? Like what's the primary hangups?
Well, let's break down what an MMM actually is at its core, right? Most MMMs would run on weekly data. Um, that means I have 150 samples. Let's work on the assumption that I have 30 variables within that model. So I've got 150 observations, because MMM is an observational technique. So to over 3 years to base.
Give Henry just a moment to come back in, hopefully.
I think that was a pretty key challenge. Oops. Oh shit. Fuck.
You're back now.
Oh, sorry. Bloody lounge Wi-Fi. But so if I just break down the market mix models themselves, right, and I just go back to the start of what I was saying, um, if you've got a weekly time series of data, you've got 150 observations. Yeah, 150 observations. Maybe you've got 30 variables, 30 things you want to know in that model. If I was running a brand tracker with 150 observations over 3 years, that would mean I have 4 people a month in that brand tracker. I don't think anyone would turn around and go, that's a statistically robust brand tracker at all, right? That's the MMM industry. So even if I go to daily, I've only got 1,200 samples over 3 years, like because you have to view each observation as samples. And so I think that causes a huge challenge. Now, how do we as modelers get around that? Well, what we do is we go, well, we know kind of that this is generally how marketing works, and this is what a modeler should do. Um, so I'm going to put some configurations in the model just to shut out more of the noise that would be introduced by low sample, right? And that's a really effective way to do it.
Mm.
The risk of that is that when I move from shutting out the noise to, hey, we think the plan should work this way, so we're going to introduce this, or hey, we think the client thinks the world works this way, so we're going to put this in, and that's where you inject a hell of a lot of bias, and
Yeah.
so that's what someone like Byron objects to. It's why he calls it witchcraft, because it effectively is. The assumptions are not transparent. There's no governance to them, and they're effectively got a bunch of settings in them that are designed to, it's data to show, not to know, as it were. So you take all of that and you go, well, okay, how do we solve that problem? In my view, you've got to do two things. One, if you're putting an assumption into a model, you've got to test it a lot more widely than you conventionally would. Yeah. Um, and so if I'm putting an assumption in, I want to know that that assumption would generally improve the performance of all MMMs, not just
Mhm.
your MMM, because that's how you get to know that it's an evidence-based assumption, because something that is true will hold up under different conditions. You then run into the second problem, which is that if you're building bespoke MMMs, your data architecture looks radically different, um, business to business to business to business. So what does all of that mean? It means that, well, actually, you can't test your prize widely for validity and things like that. So either you've got to do a lot of data science work manually to test prize one by one per client, per category, however you want to do it, or you can build a system that'll do that in a far more effective way. And so I think that what we want to see from MMMs is they have a wider body of kind of research around why the assumptions being put into them are correct, which I think would make them less biased. Whether you do that through by creating those assumptions elsewhere, or whether you do that in the model, I think is up for debate. The second kind of component that a lot of people like to tout is, well, let's use geo-based experiments and things like that to calibrate and anchor them to get ground truth. But experimentation sounds really good, and like it's like a really like, oh, we're gonna have a cool.
I have confidence that the Wi-Fi will come back. So while we're waiting for Henry to rejoin, one of the things that was eye-opening to me is I have had a lot of experience with MMMs over the years. Um, Early on, for the most part, they were only for the big brands with big budgets because they were rather expensive. And the other observation was it took a long time to get results every 6 months, every 12 months. Hey, Henry, you're back. I get a little bit of background
I've
noise.
switched to my iPhone now, so I've just switched the hotspot. I'll cop the roaming. It's fine.
Oh, it's I was just so one lead in was a little bit of my experience with MMMs. In my experience in the past, the legacy models were for big brands with big budgets, and you had to wait 6 months or 12 months for results. And I think that was one of the eye-opening pieces of not just the speed and the cost, but also that third part was you can't trust them because of all of the different complications that you outlined with a fitted model. And it's what's wild to me is we've all been told that custom is better, bespoke is better, but what your suggestion is no, like generalized approach gives us actually more accuracy and therefore more governments to be able to trust it more. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah. So I think if your job is to have data for political reasons and not predictive reasons, then I think bespoke is better.
Mm,
But and like that's a very valid reason to have an MMM, by the way. I have often said to people, you know, one thing that you might consider is, are you using this MMM to grow your business? In which case, you should be going after a generalized model, or are you using it for political reasons to rationalize key decisions? That are just generally like you're generally right, you're generally doing a good job because the P&L's going up, or whatever. But you just have people nitpicking at you. And that's a
mhm,
perfectly good reason to select a bespoke MMM and build it just to tell someone else in your organization to go away, right? And I actually think that's a very valid use case for bespoke MMMs. So, I was with someone the other day actually to pitch, and I was talking to them, and they were kind of talking about what they needed, and et cetera, et cetera. I kind of saying, well, we've been growing 20% a year, so pretty big business. And we're going 20% a year for the past 2 years. We know we're doing a great job. We just need, something to prove what we're doing is working and to defend every decision. And I said, okay, you don't want a proper MMM.
mm.
What you want to do is go build a bespoke MMM that's like going to be there for political reasons. And you can like rig the deck to make it justify every single decision that you want. Um, and that is a perfectly valid thing for some people to do. I'm not sure it's the most ethical thing to do, but I understand it in a world where like we have increasingly matrixed organizations and things like that. So yeah, but I do think one of the reasons that the models are like 6 to 12 months out of date as well, just going back to your speed point, it's actually linked to that thinness of data because like you have
Mhm.
to spend so much time as an analyst tweaking the model, configuring the model, like doing all of these very small and tactical things to the model to make it work and to make it work predictively and to make it make sense to your client. So, like, when you're not using generalized assumptions and focusing on that and using the data to kind of drive it, and instead you're trying to play like whack a mole with the model, because that's kind of what it can be. Um, that tends to be a pretty long process, that whack a mole process. So that's
Yeah.
kind of why the bespoke stuff dovetails with the speed problem, because they generally sit in the same space.
Yeah, my experience is it's a lot of the data ingestion is super timely or time intensive.
Oh, it's a nightmare.
It's an Excel file that gets emailed back and forth. Like that's the process. And I think the to your point that the cloud enabling a much better, more elegant, API connected world of the data ingestion doesn't have to take email Excel files where human error becomes a huge part of the reason the models need to have lots of back and forth. But anyway, I digress. The speed is one part, and then the expense too. I think the expense side of the equation has come into recent conversations around like Google with an open source MMM. And so there's been a lot of excitement around like, okay, now maybe the cost barrier isn't as big. But I remember on your ANA talk, the Master Data Conference, which I thought was absolutely excellent and everyone should check out on YouTube. You caution that this explosion of open source MMMs, that the MMM industry within 18 months will experience a major trust problem. Can you explain like why you fear the open source excitement might actually lead to even more lack of trust or distrust with the industry right now?
Well, let's break down how Meridian works, right? So, because like I think that's a pretty good place to start. Um, Meridian's core R&D organization reports to YouTube ad sales. So,
Mm,
pretty
the
sure I know
incentive.
pretty sure I know where that model's going. And so like if that's your org KPI, and like I actually think there's two great things that Google did on that. One is they pushed the boundaries on Google query volume. I don't agree with using GQV. I think actually brand metrics are better to like understand latent brand demand and stuff like that, and SEO metrics are better. But like incorporating that as a variable, I think is important. they introduced the concept of a time varying baseline, which I'm a big believer in time varying models. And they introduced reach and frequency as a calibration kind of mechanism. Now, here's where the rubber hits the road a little bit. Meridian will fit a reach and frequency channel in a separate parallel model to a channel that just supplies spend and impressions. The
Mm.
reach and frequency data has to be formatted in a very specific way, which only comes off the Google data platform very neatly. Otherwise, you've got to do a lot of data engineering to get it there. So it's not there's a magic button for Google channels to be preferenced, but Google knows that by making Meridian very contingent and favorable for very granular data sets and certain types of data sets that it will be able to easily supply, it can influence the marketplace.
Mm.
You know, as I said at the ANA talk, I don't think any of the open source work that we did on governance and the model governance work that we did is basically four things. One, it's how well can this model predict things that it hasn't seen just using the inputs that it has. Two, if we change the model's noise, so we add say $100 here and there across the time series, does that materially change um, what the results of that model? Because it shouldn't. If I said to you, hey, we're injecting another $100 into the spend, but the ROIs have changed, by an order of magnitude, you'd look at me like I'm insane, but that's the case for most MMX. Three, if I keep retraining this model, do I kind of see the model producing a relatively consistent result? Because if I'm adding four observations onto 150, I shouldn't see things radically change everywhere. Yeah. And then four, if I throw a piece of junk into this model, so I throw a fake media channel in, does it start attributing to that media channel? The answer should be it shouldn't attribute that much. Yeah. So, with all of that said, I don't think that work is that revolutionary. I do think that Google has some of the smartest technical people in the world. So I can only assume that the lack of validation in Meridian is a design choice, not a
Mm.
technical one. Because it took us 2 weeks to build a governance suite. But why do I think that's important? Because I think anybody can ship open source code. I think having a high quality governance is what engenders trust. And I think when you give a bunch of, 13-year-old kids the keys to Ferraris, it's very, very unlikely that you're going to have a lot of car crashes. And I think that's kind of what the open source proliferation has done, particularly when you incentivize a bunch of agencies media agencies at the moment, not exactly noted for having great margins on their core business. They certainly do on their principal businesses, but their core businesses, they're struggling. So providing large partnership and incentive programs to them in parallel to that is naturally going to create some less than ideal behaviors because people will be looking to rapidly scale up the models, rapidly deploy the models with little to no tool set to govern whether or not those models are actually high quality. If that then explodes low cost, low quality models, the trust levels in the tool will
Yep.
start to diminish. Um, and so I just think that's a pretty logical train of thought. The way I would like to see publishers contributing more thoughtfully is by making granular MMM data more available more widely to a wider range of clients. So if you think about the way most publishers behave, they'll only really supply the MMM data in a very granular format, mostly to their absolute top kind of groups and things like that, top advertisers, and they'll try to negotiate some kind of visibility into that or visibility into the results. I would like to see the publishers change their stance on that and start to instead try to open up and democratize the ability to make clients' data portable into the MMMs in a way that's fair, transparent, and accessible to everybody. I think that's really where the publishers need to reorientate themselves rather than try to compete constantly with. with different measurement frameworks. Because ultimately, Amazon's going to come out with this. Probably Microsoft will throw one in the mix. You would assume that probably X.com will end up firing up an MMM at some stage. And it's just like a commoditized battle, right? And that's not really open source. It's using open source to try to influence
Yeah.
markets. So yeah, I think that's a big problem.
Yeah, now, for the audience, for context, if you haven't checked it out, check out what Henry and the Mutinex team have published on the open source MMM validation framework. To me, it was a hugely meaningful announcement in an industry that is sort of known for lots of proprietary things that are not shared. You have now a testing framework where any MMM can use to raise the standard of measurement and governance across the board. Like Henry, I think you compared it to like the airline industry. Like just by simply raising the standard, everyone will benefit. Like the industry overall will benefit. You'll still have certain airlines that have other advantages than not. But like what your vision is, if I understand correctly, it's like you're just trying to raise the standard for everyone so that the overall MMM industry is more trusted and therefore better equipped to actually appeal to the boardroom and CFOs.
Yeah, why I see the MMM industry having one of two paths. Either we can put the aspirational path, which is the one I'm proud for Mutinex to champion, is the one where we start to get governance and standards in at the industry association level, at the industry level, to govern and raise the standard continuously to make MMMs a very reliable tool to use. Yes, we're going to improve some of our competitors' products by acting this way, but that's fine. A principle is not a principle if it doesn't cost you money. Um, uh, uh, the other side of it, of where we could go, is we could go the route of the airship industry, where we have something looks very good, looks very fancy, but after it blows up a few times, it kills a few hundred people, no one touches it again. Um, and so, I would much rather, be building an industry with, Boeing and Airbus as opposed to Hindenburg. And so I think that's probably where we see the industry because, even though Hindenburg was a great engineer, they didn't kind of keep it going very long, that industry, and it all kind of collapsed. And I think that's what bad governance does to industries. Um, Industries, particularly industries providing services to other people, where you have to trust and rely on those services, need to really aspire to have wonderfully good governance, wonderfully strong governance, so that as you kind of step on and engage with that thing, that it's going to be predictively accurate and it's going to work and it's going to work as intended. And I think if we can do that in the MMM industry and we can kind of raise the standards that, we get the models to be just broadly reliable across the board. They're not at the moment. I'd say Mutinex is the best in class model, but I would, I don't think that even we have a perfect record or streak. I'd say that there have been times where our models are not predictively accurate. But at least by having open governance with our clients and our customer base, if our model is failing, they know and we know, and so we don't use it. And we don't jump on the plane, as it were, if one of the engines is blowing up. And so I think that's where the MMM industry, we need to grow up, and we need to aspire to build great products, because I think that there's so much competition in this industry, there's so much competition in measurement, there's not enough aspiration. Everyone's
Hmm.
kind of sitting there, posting the same client case studies, things like that. I want to go bigger than that. I want us to build the most reliable, fantastic industry in the world, where everybody can kind of turn around and go, actually, we implicitly know we trust the MMM industry to allocate budgets for this reason. We free up the creativity of everybody to think. We free up everybody to think to themselves, actually, I don't need to think about the capital allocation problem as tightly. I need to think about how we make media fun and interesting. I need to think about how we make creative sick. All of that stuff, which is where human brilliance comes through. And so, but we're only going to get there with great governance. We can only get to that future with great governance.
I've been struck by Google in particular, and I believe I also read Analytic Partners is also on board and backing this. Like this is a movement. Like this is happening, right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah. So I will say that we generally have pretty good relationships with our competitors. Like I love a crew called the Recast Crew. Big fans of theirs. I think they're really decent human beings. I think the AP team are like really nice people. Had some really good chats. There's a guy called Jason McNellis there, he's just a delightful person to like talk about MMM theory with. I think by and large it's a collegiate industry, but we need to move from just being collegiate to being aspirational and to kind of leading together and collectively to build our category up and to build it up for clients and to build it up to in a way where clients just absolutely know they'll have radical transparency and trust no matter what they do.
Love it. So keeping score for the audience members, we challenge the legacy model, this idea that evidence-based, generalized approach is far more accurate and trustworthy than a fitted or custom bespoke model. Henry, I want to dive into Mutinex specifically about some of the things that you're working on, your approach to both the model, the speed, the finance ready kind of outputs. I guess we all start here. Like, what's the one thing that Mutinex does that legacy players cannot?
We literally can generate an answer baked with marketing science effectiveness and financial MMM outputs. Like we can respond to a question in natural language in seconds. Like I think you can kind of look at so many of the MMM players. Were like everyone's drowning in data today. Everyone. There is not one person on the planet. The iPhone moment for the Mutinex product, the moment that marketers go, I cannot live without this, is when they're in a meeting, and asked a question, they're able to log into Growth OS and they're able to type in what that exact question was and have the MMM model speak to them back. That is a moment that changes marketers' lives because it changes their credibility in the boardroom. How many times has a marketer said, let me get back to you, and then lost all control over the decision? Happens every single day. Um, and in that moment, that's when marketers retake control. I think we're doing really interesting stuff in the AI space. We have some of the best engineers in the world, early stage Uber, early stage Canberra, Atlassian, all those sorts of places. But that engineering team is coming together to pursue a vision where clients can literally talk to their MLM, get the answers that they need in seconds. And I think, that to me takes the internal cost of ownership for measurement to zero. That takes the cost of answering a question to zero for an organization. It means that the organization has a growth brain that they can talk to, that's not just summarizing the numbers, but it's processing the information into something meaningful. That changes marketers' lives. It really does. And so I think that's the thing that we get the most right. And I think when you sweat about like no one gives a sorry, I shouldn't say shit on an American call. No
Oh,
one
it's
gives an
all
S
good.
no one gives an S word about measurement. That's not the currency here. Currency here is, can we provide an answer for little to no cost to
Mhm.
answer key business questions? And is that answer trustworthy, insightful, and timely? And those are the three things I care about. So I don't think anyone wakes up in the morning, frankly, goes, I want to buy today a market mix model. I think any single person on this call would think that way. No one sits there and goes, I like, and that tells me it's not a real product. I wake up and I want to buy answers. I wake up thinking, oh, how am I going to answer this today?
Yeah.
That is the core unit of product value that we need to have as a business. That is the core unit that we need to reinvent in this world. Is how do we get people to answers quickly? I think if we can do that, we will start to truly unlock the potential of most marketing budgets. And I think we'll also start to truly reduce the amount of money spent on data and analytics. People spend too much money on this stuff. You know, we spend way too much money kind of trawling through data, not enough time thinking, getting inspired,
Mhm.
understanding how to be creative. So I want to build the system that automates that, takes that down to basically nil, so that we can free up time for that stuff. Because as an industry, we're spending 80% of our money. I heard publicists the other day talk publicly about how they want to invest in data for their clients. Rah 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 rah. I could not think of anything less inspiring than every brand thinking being purely defined by data. I think every brand needs to answer questions quickly with data, but I don't want brands to be defined by data. And so I think if we're in a world where we're spending all of our money on data and analysis and trying to analyze how to answer questions, we're going to be trapped in a world where our solutions are defined by that. Whereas I think the world that we can usher in is take the cost of getting a growth answer to zero, and we do that in our platform, and we're going to use that to actually unlock the world's creativity again.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. Like being evidence based, not just data driven, and find the correct answers behind and spend less time in the actual analysis. I love that. Is there a I guess a proof point where you see whether it's one of your own clients, like I know you measure usage of your platform a lot. Is it the conversational interface, the mate platform itself that really becomes the one thing that like, all right, this changed the game. This is how my usage is going to uptick this month on the platform.
Yeah, I obsess about usage. My team would know I would look at usage every single day. So I can't go into the actual mate dashboard, but hopefully Claire doesn't shoot me for doing this. Um, but I think I should be okay. So I'm actually gonna log in and just show you like a metric that I care about, which is like actually, because how useful we're being is like, okay, how much time can we see in platform and things like that is generally something that I would look at a lot, and I kind of want to see like a certain amount of usage coming through. So like roughly, I think this is like a pretty good indicator of kind of where it's at. This is absolutely not prepared. Like you can see here, that like this is actually just my raw amplitude dash. But oh well. So like roughly, if I go back and look at this number over, so this is like weekly session time,
Mhm.
and
And you have big brands like this is like brands like Domino's use your platform. You
yeah,
have
yeah,
agencies. Yeah.
yeah. So you can kind of, last tweet. Let's go last tweet four. So you can kind of see here that like roughly like we tracked up, so we had a slew of onboardings there, so that's why I think it's dipped down. Like roughly we have about like between roughly an hour per user. So
Wow.
this is at a per user basis. So average weekly session time per user. On average, we would have like 8 to 9 users coming through per customer. So I think like any platform that where we're able to see a usage pattern of like an hour per week per user, of
Hmm.
logged in active time moving the mouse around and stuff like that, because that's how we define it. It's probably pretty good, and that's probably where I'm pretty big on it. Um, Ultimately, though, like I think we also track a lot like the number of decisions made. Like you can write a query in Mate and say, show me all the optimizations I did and all the changes I did year on year, which ones paid off, which ones didn't, and it will actually tell you like the financial value of your optimizations and what you changed and improved in media from flighting performance, things like that. Like the ability to walk into a CFO and basically they go, well, what do we do with our media budget? And you write a prompt and say, well, look, here's all the optimizations, here's what we got right, here's what we got wrong, and here's the net value of that. And you can do that in like 1 minute. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And it's a game it's just a game changing moment, I think, in how all of this stuff works, and it starts to mean that the world of effectiveness and the world of like doing things effectively starts to become a financial metric in the business as well, which I think is critically important.
I think we have a few questions coming in the chat. Yeah, this is probably a good time to shift into live Q&A. So I'll start with Scott's question. What are the best new questions the new platform is letting marketers ask beyond what an MMM is supposed to answer?
So I think we're going to be announcing a pretty cool deal shortly to plug into one of the world's largest effectiveness bodies, um,
Mm,
to actually like bring the best practice knowledge of that body into how the agent is thinking about the MMM. So when it's seeing stuff in the MMM, it can contextualize it with the wider world of effectiveness. I think that's going to
absolutely.
be a really cool moment. I think I see a lot of questions about brand equity, as well. Like questions around like how much will will our baseline atrophy over time, and pulling in best practice knowledge around that and so on to actually provide that answer, really provide that context, so that the marketer is not just able to talk about incrementality, but is also able to talk about base erosion. I think is
Yeah,
really, really, really cool. And so I've seen a lot of that. One
that's
other
awesome.
real, the other one other really cool one I've seen lately is I saw this query and I tried it out myself because I thought it was so cool. We had a user. I didn't know this was possible in Mate, but Mate's actually really good at it, where it can analyze the characteristics of a channel, or you can pull everything that you've done in the MMM, and then it can go, actually, okay, go find me channels that have similar patterns and characteristics in the world of effectiveness that I haven't tried yet. Yeah.
Mm,
And give me an ROI range for those channels based on everything that you can find in the MMM. That ability to like, no one in the world has used MMM to estimate like going into a new channel and what that new channel might mean and how best to execute that new channel. But Mate can do that now using the MMM as a database to then explore the kind of wider world. That to me was a wild query.
that's
I can take zero credit for it. Completely accidental, and had no product intention of going there. Just a happenstance of deploying and working with AI.
Yeah, we're like two thoughts on that. I'll speak for uh, the US. We're definitely a beat behind when it comes to evidence-based marketing. Like this is still not universally adopted. Like we see it every day. We are big fans and advocates and students of evidence-based marketing. And one thing that we've seen with MMMs is it sort of reinforces short-termism. The models are built to really show that short-term incrementality over 30 or 60-day ad stock windows. What I love about what you're saying is by bringing in erosion to your baseline that can equate to equity, you could actually show if you overinvest in performance, you should expect to see brand and your baseline take a hit over time. Am I understanding that right?
100%. Yeah. Yeah. And I think
That's
that's like, one of the problems with the way that MMMs present information is if you're just presenting MMM in kind of ROI and things like no marketing ecosystem is like just a one channel to one sale kind of ecosystem. So being able to ask the question and get the full response back with all the nuanced information allows you to bring the world of effectiveness into the MMM in a way that you couldn't do before. So, before, if I'm just looking at a bunch of bar charts, it's very hard to communicate principles of effectiveness
right.
and how they will impact the business. Doing it in a language interface, that's really easy. So, I think the language interface is far superior to the bar chart interface, not only from the user experience perspective, but from the quality of response perspective.
Yeah. No, I thought like anything that bridges the gap between theory and practice is wonderful to hear. And I also feel like it helps actually advance the case for creativity and the power of emotion and brand building in the boardroom, because often those are the things that help with the long-term equity and at least gives a better balance to it. Like you need to do both, harvest existing demand, build future demand where you can. But I like that a lot. What other questions everyone have? Put them in the chat. I'll ask them. If not, I have a long list of others. Um, yes, Henry.
Yeah.
Okay, we have one that I have biggest myth about MMM that you wish would die.
That MMM can only measure short term. I think
Hmm.
that's a really dumb statement. Like a good MMM can measure short and long term, um, and and will do so with kind of a multiple model approach. But absolutely is the truth. Any MMM that's not covering base erosion is um is not a very good MMM in my view, and I think that's a huge issue in MMMs. They have that perception.
Is that kind of related to that? Is there a metric you wish marketers would stop worshiping or stop
Yeah,
overinvesting?
prompted awareness. It's the most useless metric in the world. Like you're a big brand. Um, hey, population, have you heard of me, big brand that you would have heard of in your childhood? Yeah, of course I have. Like every marketer should use unprompted awareness, not prompted. The amount of times I see a marketer going, "Oh, but our awareness was 95%." I couldn't care what your prompted awareness is. It does not matter. It has no relationship to mental availability. So, yeah, I think like I have no idea why any marketer on the planet pays for prompted awareness. Makes no sense to me.
I have a couple others. Let me see if there's any in the chat quickly. Here we go from Mark. Beyond the political self-serving purposes, what are the biggest areas of pushback or challenge from brands on why not to use a generalized model that you've seen?
I think that biggest pushback is generally that every business wants to feel that they're highly unique.
Mm,
Um, and so, and I think the argument that I would always make to brands is every brand is unique in how it shows up and presents itself, but they exist in categories that converge consumer habits and media consumption that converges where they can reach consumers. So convergence is very, very high at a category level, at a consumer preferences level, and at a media consumption level. But every brand orientates to the fact that, well, I'm different to the other 200 brands. That's true, but it doesn't mean that the model doesn't need to be different uh, or very bespoke to drive a nuanced view of you. And so I think that's a big challenge in the
yeah,
space generally. Like,
the marketers want to believe their brand is terminally unique, and therefore, even the word generalized starts to trigger. There must be patterns that are universal. But what I love about the evidence-based marketing inputs into it is it suggests that there are things that are as close to physics as we have. And this is I'll ask this because it's maybe a bit of a nerdy question, but it's like for those that are plugged in, they know that advertising is probabilistic, not deterministic. Yet MMMs sometimes are often looked at as like, because I spent X, I should expect Y. And can
yeah.
you talk about some tension in that there and your view on that?
Well, I often say MMM, like running an MMM program's like gambling, but you're counting cards, you know, um, because that's kind of what it is, right? Like, instead of kind of, playing blackjack at the table and having a 50-50 chance of winning, we're getting ourselves an edge to win, a probabilistic edge, as it were. So
Yep.
you're not going to get everything right. You're just going to give yourself an edge in the probabilities, so that when you roll the dice more, you get it right more often than not. And so
Yep.
I think that's the really, 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 really good way to think of it. Um,
Yeah,
you
it's a
know,
weak force, but still a force nonetheless.
yeah, I mean, advertising is the weakest force until you realize that there's not many other forces within your control.
Mm,
So, everyone says advertising a weak force. I'm like, yeah, that's true, but I'm not really sure you as brand X can control the CPI. So maybe don't fucking worry about it.
yeah.
Like there's only so much that brands can do. Um, and so yeah, so I think that's a yeah, it's a really tricky one, but I think that they are better thought of as giving huge probability edges as opposed to being bang on forecasters.
Yep. Yep. I like that. All right. One from Christopher. As AI increasingly drives forecasting and optimization, do you see MMMs evolving into autonomous decision machines? And if so, how do you keep the human strategist in the loop without turning MMM just into another black box?
I see them evolving somewhat that way. Yes. Um, I think a few things. One, your governance needs to be really, really open.
Mm,
So, black boxes are only black boxes if you can't see what's in them. Yeah. So I think having that governance position is very important. That's one of the reasons I'm actually so passionate about it. I see advertising being largely a two-speed economy in the future. One, you are going to have the optimization layer and the kind of autonomy layer. I don't think humans should be doing that. Like, I just don't. Like I think that there's enough evidence to say that that's not a human problem. I also don't think brands are materially grown through optimization. So, like, I don't think that you can take a brand from A to B, and I don't think you can make a brand really change how it looks and shows up and feels by just looking at past data. So I find it very, very unlikely that we should be that humans will be out of the loop with that in mind. I think a better model to think of is how do we free up and spend a lot more money on
yeah,
strategic and creative thinking, and use AI to drive the BAU into the kind of dust. And I think that's the real problem here is that the BAU, it's bloody expensive at the moment. You know, managing the complexity, the rate of errors that humans have, like how many juniors have to be staffed on accounts just to traffic the bloody spreadsheets. It's insane. It's not sustainable. No one in advertising feels particularly happy or not tired, and you know, you walk around ad agencies at the moment, and I hate to say it, but advertising is not the happy place it once was. And I think that the reason for that is we are overwhelmed by optimization. Well, fuck it.
mm,
Let's put that to the AIs. Let's get rid of the optimization work because I think part of the reasons that brands haven't grown that much in the Fortune 100 over the past 10 years is because they've been so focused on optimization and they haven't invested hard into creativity. And
yeah.
so I think that they should be doing that.
Yeah, one way I like to think about it is there's a big difference between optimization and true experimentation. Like the experiments of the great unknown, like to the question that you pose in the query, the channels we have never tested, the things that we have never yet done. It could be related to the creative that's in market itself, could be related to some bolder media choices. But those to me, I think, are the most freeing, but also challenging and also brings the most joy if you get them right or at least learn from them. And I think you're right. Like so much of the data does feel like it's bogged down in getting the incrementality from, point oh 0.01 to point oh 0.02 versus the like larger scale experiments that we have not yet attempted. I dig that a lot.
Totally true. 100% true.
Um, all right. I have one more question. I know we're kind of getting close to time. If anyone else has any questions for Henry or I, feel free to put them in the chat. I'll send us off with one good one, I hope. So for marketers, the question is the practical payoff. We talked about the generalized model, hence the title. The revolution will be generalized in terms of disrupting legacy MMMs. How does a generalized model change the way a marketer budgets and tests and makes decisions?
I think they should be focused a lot more on accuracy and evidence as opposed to reacting to kind of short term signals. I think it
Mm,
depends. If we're talking about a bespoke MMM, I think that a generalized model will generally say a few things that you don't want to hear. Yeah. So I think clients have to get a little bit more comfortable with that when they're working with a generalized model, because what you're sacrificing is data being pleasing for data
mm,
being accurate. Um, and so that always creates a bit of discomfort because what you will find is there will be some uncomfortable truths, and your primary job is to validate it and embrace it and kind of see if it's going to make a material difference to your business. And so I think that's when you're kind of working through it and how it impacts budgets. I think very often, I had a customer the other day that the 25% of their the model was saying 25% of their budget and performance was junk. They didn't believe me. So I can't be spending 25%. It's millions and millions of dollars. And I said, well, it's all digital. Let's just shut it off for 2 weeks, see what happens. We shut it off for 2 weeks, the 25%. Nothing happened. Nothing. Um, this person saved probably 5 to 10% of their budget instantly. Then they reinvested it to brand and got a huge jump out of that.
Mm.
And so suddenly they're on the acceleration again. So I've seen hundreds of cases like that, hundreds. And so I think that's where it gets really fun
Yeah.
and where it changes decision making. But you have to realize that in order to get your budget optimized, you've also got to accept that there are quite a bit of things in your budget that are probably wrong. A bespoke model will hide that from you because the modeler
Mm.
will be trying to instinctively please you. And so they'll incorporate your knowledge as business knowledge. Really, you'll just have been putting your own biases about how you think your budget works in there.
It's a awesome confronting question of do you want the MMM to teach you something and bring some perhaps uncomfortable truths, or be a comfort blanket that makes you feel good about the decisions you've already made? It's like a throwdown challenge, I think, for marketers on what the overall intent of an MMM is.
I think the intent of measurement should be to grow businesses, but I fully accept that the intent of measurement for many is political.
Mhm.
I intend to be on the side of the people growing businesses.
I like it. I like it a lot. Um, I think we're at time. I'm game for any more questions last minute. But otherwise, just want to thank everyone for joining. Spend an hour with Henry and I. I enjoy conversations like this. I think if you all liked it, let us know. And we'll host more conversations like this in the future. We really appreciate you all being here, spend some time with us. Hopefully you found it valuable, learned a little bit about the future measurement of MMM specifically, and why a generalized approach is far better than a fitted, and hopefully reach out to the Mutinex team that they can help. It's a awesome platform. They've been wonderful partners, truly. Henry and Andy and Claire are amazing. We've had lots of good conversations just about challenging how we even think about what an MMM can do, what it should do. So even just as a sparring partner, the platform is cool, but just the partnership itself is truly rare, and we like that a lot. So appreciate you guys.
Amazing. Great to see you, Chris, and great to see you, Team TRG.
All right, thank
Bye.
you.